DJ Filice, and his topic is autonomous architecture, the hybridization of the mobility and dwelling device. Excuse me. DJ's committee consists of Jennifer MacArthur as supervisor, Arthur Rigglesworth as second reader, and I'm sitting in as program representative. And we have two external critics with us today, Maziar Asefi and Ariana Mazzeo. And I'll just briefly introduce both our guests. Maziar is a professor of architecture in Tabriz Islamic Art University and an instructor with us at Ryerson's Department of Architectural Science. He has over 17 years experience in teaching design studios, transformable and interactive architecture, and advanced structures. And Maziar has authored 7 books and has registered 3 patents in the field of transformable and kinetic architecture. Ariana Mazzeo is a postdoctoral fellow in the University of Toronto's Institute of Communication, Culture, Information, and Technology. She previously served as professor of practice in design engineering education at Harvard University, where she taught in the Graduate School of Design as well as Harvard School of Engineering and Applied Science. Her research focuses on innovation in design engineering education, including online and analog performance studies in the design engineering curriculum, innovating both in pedagogy and design research for social change in the city. She's also an artist, a performer using drama as a tool for inclusion and connection. So welcome both Maziar and Ariana.
Thank you, Mark.
Daniel, thanks for joining us. Daniel, is this a live presentation or a video?
It's a video.
It's a video. Okay, so I won't worry about timing. Presumably you've already looked after that. So it'll run for about 20 minutes, after which we will invite questions from our guests. If there are questions for clarification, if there aren't, then we can go right into a discussion of the work. After we've discussed the work, then we will ask you to leave the meeting, Daniel, so that we can deliberate privately, and then Jennifer, as your supervisor, will debrief you on the discussion. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay, yeah, just again, everyone, thank you for coming, taking the time to join me today. So I'm just gonna start it off now. Thank you.
This work is titled Autonomous Architecture, the Hybridization of the Dwelling and Mobility Device, and it will attempt to address the traditionally static nature of our dwellings and its effect on how we perceive our concept of home. This has been addressed through 3 phases. First is the employment of a theoretical framework that supports the idea of autonomy of devices. Second, the identification of compound technological devices. Third is the speculation of a new living context. It was through the work of actor network theory, specifically French philosopher Bruno Latour's approach to the sociology of the association, where it was acknowledged that we, the human actant, are only a fragment of the collective culture. Latour argues that even non-humans can have agency and thus are equally actants with humans. The artifacts that we come across and engage with are the tangible representations of this relationship and the underlying relational structure at play. This is the non-place known as the hybrid network. Bruno Latour refers to the tangible artifacts as black boxes, objects that contain a composition of assorted parts assembled based on a now invisible set of rules and intentions. Latour suggests, if you mention an agency, you have to provide the account of its actions, and to do so you need to make more or less explicit which trails have produced which observable traces. So as Latour suggests, this thesis presentation will attempt to explain the process of hybridization between the dwelling and mobility device and how it has materialized throughout my design investigation. Hybridization is defined as the process where 2 initial actants take equal part in a dialogue represented by a third actant, the hybrid. It is through this process where traces of duality are removed and replaced with a descriptive state of unification. The created hybrid is now comprised of both social and natural, human and non-human, subject and object. These hybrids act as connecting points for the ongoing and shifting network of people and things that generate the contemporary world. To undergo this process, we are to remove any hierarchy amongst elements. This allows for the hybrid to employ only essential elements of each participating actant to minimize the compromise between the dwelling device and the mobility device as we explore the relational structure. As we proceed, it is important to keep in mind that the dwelling device will be portrayed as the laneway suite, a newly adopted building typology in Toronto, whereas the mobility device will be portrayed as the autonomous automobile, an emerging technological advancement. It should be noted that this connection is not free. Something must be lost or paid for something to be gained. Therefore, components deemed non-essential will have no connections made. It is by virtue of the technical mediation methods presented by Bruno Latour that allows for this collaboration and documentation to occur. There are 4 methods defined by Latour that have been expanded upon in my thesis document. The hybridization process will reveal which components are essential in the definition of each actant by forming connections between the various artifacts brought forward. Historically, we have separated all aspects associated with mobility from our dwellings. These barriers have been fabricated by the remnants of past technologies and ideologies, where the moments of their engagement have been stifled in order to preserve the integrity of the current dwelling condition. As the world outside becomes increasingly connected by interweaving of both physical and technical networks, the traditional dwelling remains in isolation. This identified barrier is to be confronted on the premise of increased dependency through a sort of societal pressure and impact, as proven most recently by the pandemic response. It is by virtue of this increased reliance on subscription and delivery services that the user may meet their daily needs. The design investigation is to occupy an idealized future scenario where the growing normality of subscription-based model will be playing a key role in how we engage with artifacts, creating a responsive architecture that provides refuge but without isolation. What this means for the user is an increased enrollment in a larger systematic framework of operation beyond the restrictive practices of the singular ownership schema. There are 2 primary principles, service and access, that make up most of the services that have become staples in our daily lives, such as ride-sharing, food and item delivery, mobile applications, computer software, and entertainment services. A more thorough application is to be presented here so that you may enhance your dwelling through subscription. Therefore, it is through this framework that the hybrid dwelling is to be considered as a laboratory, a concealed study that has the potential to manifest into infinite reinterpretations removed from any existing contextual predeterminations or causes. The Toronto neighborhood of Runnymede had been selected as an area of study to exemplify an archetypal site so that I may minimize discrepancies when comparing the operation of multiple variations. This proposal is to be set in the near future where the speculative technologies presented have persisted to create an enhanced subscription model adopted at a city scale. The new culture will increasingly relinquish ownership in favor of subscription-based components in order to meet the demands of the evolving user. In this future scenario, the once static dwelling becomes transformed by an increased dynamism and connectivity. The provision of 2 acting scales, local and global, allows for a design process to develop unhindered. This allows for the design exploration to accurately measure the acting potential of the localized hybrid on the collective. The static nature of the traditional dwelling derives from its inability to partake in the autonomous processes. It is in the definition of autonomous, having freedom to act independently or operating without direct human control, where agency is also provided to the non-human. It is the goal of the design project to have the dwelling participate actively in the assembly of our dwelling spaces. In order to do so, I have selected the autonomous automobile as a secondary actant as it has proven to have the innate capabilities of emulating programmatic functions often restricted to the dwelling itself. This hybrid dwelling is to leverage both technological advancements and manufacturing techniques inherent in the automotive industry. A responsive architecture can then surpass any barriers or interruptions instated by the traditional dwelling. This will result in a new living context reliant on the mobility devices for transportation and transformations. The automobile, referred to as canoe, was selected as a premise for assigning reasonable spatial constraints and proportions to work with. This pending automobile was built upon an all-subscription-based service. It is no longer expected for the dwelling device to house the automobile, rather the automobile arrives upon request. This is made possible by the newly adopted skateboard chassis of the autonomous automobile, where the essential components and functions are nested into a singular common platform. This self-contained pure electric powertrain severs all irrelevant mechanical connections of the traditional internal combustion engine that has previously restricted engagement. This transformation allows for the common platform to act independently from the automobile's shell or functional valence, where the valence is to be considered as a cover attached to the chassis in order to encapsulate the space, thereby reconsidering the interior space as a mobile room at the service of the passengers, as depicted here by Canoe's loft-inspired vehicle. The traditional hinge presented on the contemporary automobiles will be superseded by the ability to quickly dismantle the functional valence from the skateboard chassis, allowing the mobile room inside to be plucked or pulled into the dwelling. The concept of the mobile room isn't new, as many designers both in the field of architecture and automotive design have considered the thought. It was in Mario Bellini's 1972 Kara Sutra concept car that the passenger found themselves in what was known as the mobile human space, an adaptable space for all imagined activities to manifest. Bellini sought to enforce an increased involvement by the human actant to reimagine the normalities of space, offering features such as height-adjustable roofs and large operable surfaces to add in the aid of exploration of the possible uses. It would not be enough to replicate the functions typically found within the dwelling, but rather explore their mobile alternatives, a common platform for functions to manifest. Maintaining the plug-in methodology, the common platform can be customized with varying modules dependent on the user's specified use. This is to be accomplished by adopting the principles evident in modularity and customized elements prevalent in the mass production of the automobile. The common platform is to be reconfigured in a cyclical process of constructing, living, and conceiving the features that encompass the mass production spirit. The laneway suite will leverage this concept of the common platform to create a dynamic dwelling space. This illustration shows a possible method in which a common platform could be transferred between the autonomous automobile and the laneway suite. A standard footprint for the design investigation had been established based on the median between the autonomous automobile and the typical typologies often found in the placement of the potential laneway suite. I decided on an interior footprint of 3.7 meters by 6.1 meters. This is similar to a typical one-car garage. With the application of a second level, the total gross floor area equates to roughly 45 square meters. I was able to operate within these constraints by leveraging the deployment of an intermediary module and the module banks mobilized by a primary mover, the common platform. I have chosen two design variations from a larger sample set to further explain the symbiotic relationships of the dwelling and the mobility device into a hybrid form. Both variations are assembled on the same actins. However, by realigning the obligatory points of assembly, there have been a significant change in approach. Variation 1. By analyzing the relationship between the mobility and dwelling device in the hybrid using Latour's technical mediation, we see that Variation 1's workflow utilized the method of composition, where a hybrid is created based on the combined actions of all parts together to create a system of operation to overcome interruptions. At each layer, a new interruption may arise that was unforeseen, requiring a new actant layer to be added to surpass the barrier with the hope to maintain an original path of travel and desire. This process of reaction is evident in the linearity of the design approach and sequence of Variation 1. You, the user, are seated on the common platform, which is being transferred from within the autonomous automobile directly into the laneway suite. During the docking process, you will find that all inactive modules are stowed away. You are now welcome to move freely. In just moments after your departure, the common platform is surrounded by semi-autonomous module banks, as if entering a pit stop. The platform is loaded and unloaded simultaneously to any requested configuration pending the availability of parts. For example, the sleeping quarters configuration will unfold module banks to block exterior gaze inwards while exposing private elements and full bedding that would otherwise be set away from the public. Although the common platform may look dormant after arrival, beneath the finished surface, the platform is being connected to utility outlets and a lift mechanism. The common platform can now manipulate spatial conditions by moving up and down to both living levels. This illustration showcases how both space and the module banks have been planned in layers. This configuration is also ideal for a live-work arrangement, as you are provided with all functionality of a complete office environment. The backsplash doubles as a panel, which folds down to provide a large work surface that covers up all countertop appliances. A window is placed behind to provide you with natural task lighting when in this configuration. You now have an ample amount of workspace. As your workspace gets tucked away along the length of the dwelling, the center of the dwelling becomes an elongated open corridor for circulation, with a visible expanse in each direction. This configuration provides you with a space similar to a traditional studio apartment style layout. While walking into the newly expanded space, a fully sized couch is brought up from storage to create a comfortable living room for you to unwind. The ability to integrate full-sized equipment modules gives you the opportunity to host guests without any inconvenience. Upon conclusion of dinner preparation, just moments before your guests arrive, the kitchen module bank stows away in a similar sequence, this time to minimize the total modules remaining on the floor plate. A large set of glazing units are revealed, as the entertainment unit folds away, opening the whole corner of the living space. This hosting configuration allows for a full-size dining room to occupy the open plan, creating the ideal atmosphere for entertaining. As demonstrated through the design sequence, the internalized actions are encapsulated by a functional valence that has been formulated around the same modulation and customization principles shared with the automobile. The proposed variations pulls its design language from a scale of modules being used. The term dwell, defined in the technical sense, means a slight regular pause in motions or operation of a machine. This best describes the actions taken in the design sequence of variation 1. There is to be a retainment of temporality and transformability evident in the transitory way of thinking about the dwelling. This process was both speculative in layering and in acting, as the resultant hybrid expressed dependency on the mobility device as the primary mediator and the dwelling device as a subsidiary, making it a mobility-led hybrid. Variation 2. Latour explains that the attribution of one actor of the role of a prime mover in no way weakens the necessity of a composition of forces to explain action. The design project was one of iterative mentality, where the findings would embrace the inconclusive nature of the actor network. Therefore, the technique derived from variation 1 produced meanings and methods of articulation that had transformed the initial goal. A new understanding of the primary actants modifies the approach through mediation of a known artifact. It is by delegation that an operational script is assigned to the common platform through the process of inscription. Formulating meaning in the new hybridized artifact, the dwelling-led hybrid ensures continuous operation, creating a more stable collective. The second design sequence leverages the circulation and arrangement principles of the autonomous automobile to encapsulate multiple common platforms, demonstrating a new level of responsiveness and capability with multiple occupants. In this method, the module banks become more homogeneous in their construction, as they no longer need to be constructed for a singular use or placement, as demonstrated here by a fictional scenario. It is 7 a.m. and you awake to the sound of an alarm. Your morning routine tells you to head to the secondary bedroom space to awake your children or as a lingering guest. You awake your partner and direct them to jump into the shower first as you head downstairs. Referring to the image on the left, the bed you just left folds away into a storage space, clearing the common platform from any unwanted modules before you are transported to the lower level. Since the bathroom module is a static element, the common platform can now be temporarily removed from the current location without compromising the use of the module bank. In the image to the right, you make your way across the ground floor. The second common platform is lowered to greet you, while exposing a ground level to an ample amount of natural morning sunlight. As you are once again elevated, a kitchen configuration is prepped and awaiting your arrival. The newly occupied space is open in both directions. One way is a private courtyard across from your former bedroom configuration, and the other is a vista into the shared yard, a communal area connecting with the primary house. As you converge on the lower level for breakfast, layers of the module bank are brought down with you to create a breakfast enclave, where the secondary bedroom module previously inhabited. Simultaneously, an entertainment panel slides out from behind the module bank so you may catch up with the world news today or check the live status update of your hybrid dwelling. As you complete your breakfast, the platform returns to the upper level to begin preparation for its next use, where the other platform is loaded with desired modules for the day's activities before returning to pick you up. After being transferred to an autonomous automobile, you take a glimpse back and experience the outside scenario of the laneway community more vividly. You will observe an active ecosystem of hybrid dwellings. All are considered participating actants, and all are influencing a larger collective. In Bruno Latour's theoretical framework, the hybridized actants are represented as black boxes containing a composition of assorted parts assembled based on a set of rules and intentions, no different from the steps taken in the presented design sequences. As witnessed with variation 1, the assembled black box is translated further through the convergence with multiple content-rich actants. There was a time when each of these actants in the black box were independent in action and intent before the reliance on a prime mover. Most of these entities now sit in silence. The earlier exercises of this thesis were set up to detect their subtle actions and identify components dwelling with us quietly. This accurately articulates our relationship with the dormant tools that occupy our dwellings, where in the design projects they are further stripped of scripts and processed as modules. It is only when they are mobilized can they provide meaning and function to the specified program of action. This process is depicted in both design sequences when the identified room configurations goes through a process of change to provide a new use and meaning to the same space. This is how the hybrid is able to convert a bedroom into a formal dining room and convey the essence of the desired function. These modules exist in assemblies, whereby they produce the supportive structure that the hybrid variations are dependent on. In order to maneuver from variation 1 to variation 2, fundamental differences between the mobility-led or dwelling-led is a simple result of alignment. Both identified variations seek to achieve a similar goal, but in the arrangement of obligatory passage points, where the difference between a passive occupant and an active user is determined. This thesis has confronted the concept of the non-human actant as a static figure. By having the devices partake in exercises that formulated a well-established degree of knowledge regarding the associative groups, a hybrid entity was able to evolve. By partaking in the autonomous process, the resulting hybridized architecture is able to establish a new working methodology. Through the exploration to date, this thesis has proven that the hybridization of mobility and dwelling device is possible, even signifying that the refinement of techniques may lead to a more efficient variation of the design project. In the end, the user is to be provided with an interface to transform the dwelling space on demand. By adopting the methods of technical mediation to create a program of action, unmet, this thesis has engaged, exemplified, and invoked this shift to a new living context and explored how the hybridization affects our conception and experience of home life. Thank you for listening to the thesis presentation titled The Autonomous Architecture, the Hybridization of the Dwelling and Mobility Device.
Okay, thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
We are now ready to take any questions for clarification from our two external reviewers. Maziar, Ari, do you have any questions? Not so much commentary, but things that need some clarification before we get into the commentary.
Sure. BJ, congratulations. This is a brilliant thesis. I really appreciate your presentation and your clarity. And also the framework of the scenario was excellent. I have just one question, which is relating more to the user. When you talk about that this thesis can argue that you want to confirm and the transformation of the dwelling space on demand, how do you basically create this insight? I mean, from which kind of data do you have this decision making in order to have variation, you know? And you say, I have this variation one, this other, because those users is this in this other scenario. Do you have like some methodologies, qualitative insight, quantitative insight? How do you decide the scenario, the variation?
Okay, so I took a couple approaches. That's kind of why I had multiple variations as I produced the project. I think in the beginning, I kind of looked at certain rooms that the user or the occupant uses and kind of try to quantify what elements are being used to create that room for its existence, and providing the characteristics as the occupant is seeking, and then kind of quantifying that into different configurations and trying to make like programmatic or module banks based on certain programmatic functions. In terms of this, the way I did in terms of this intervention particularly is I looked at the laneway suite as it's usually used for storage of an automobile and then a smaller living unit. So then I kind of looked at process like for those particular occupants, how they may use space more efficiently. So that was part of the exercise as well. And then, so I was kind of created a target audience in that sense, rather than saying that this is to replace all types of dwellings. Is there, I guess that was kind of my approach. Is there a part I missed there that, sorry?
No, thank you. It's okay.
Thank you
for clarifying that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Marco, the thesis is okay to me. I have a number of questions. Can I ask them now or maybe later? What is the timing for that?
No, now is good.
I can ask?
Yes, please, Maziar.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So DJ, thank you for your great presentation. I really enjoyed reading your thesis. You have created a good and in-depth theoretical framework for the hybridization of dueling and mobile devices.
Yep.
So I have a question. I'm going to ask your question in two actually separate parts. First is going to be my general comments on your thesis, and then I'm going to ask you some kind of technical question. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
So I believe that's your final presentation. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. So there are a few typos and errors in your thesis that I would like you to actually correct them. For example, in figure 7T, you need to change actin 3 to 4, and there's some more, there's some more errors. If you want, I can send it to you after.
That would be great. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
The other things I want to mention is transition from one part to the other is not clear in your thesis. You're jumping from one part to the other without a proper connection. So I strongly suggest you to have a kind of transition statements after each chapter so that we know what you're going to talk about next in the next chapter.
Okay.
The other question I have here is that I think you need to have a reference for some of the sentences and statements that you have claimed in your thesis. For example, you mentioned in your introduction, historically, we have separated all aspects associated with mobility from the dueling spaces.
Yeah.
But we have a number of examples of mobile dueling, like yurts, Bedouin tent, and teepee used by nomadic people 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. Okay.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think you need to be more specific when you are, generally talking about it, making kind of general statements. Okay. And the other things I have, your thesis is considered as a research-based design project. I see that you have mentioned your objectives in different parts throughout your manuscript, but I suggest you to have a kind of a specific part in your thesis explicitly talking about your objectives, aim, and also your research question, because I didn't see that part in your thesis.
Okay.
The final general comments I have is about your conclusion. I think you need to expand your conclusion a little bit more. Your conclusion is quite short. So it would be good if you actually, explain how the hybridization between mobility devices and dueling can actually influence our everyday life. Okay, I want to see more kind of discussion and more kind of comments and the final of your thesis.
Okay.
Okay, now let me ask you, I have actually too many questions, but I'm just going to ask you just a couple of them now. You have explained the 4 methods of technical mediation developed by Latour, okay?
Yes.
I would like to know how you have decided to use composition and delegation methods for the development of your design among the other proposed methods, okay? Is there any criteria that should be taken into consideration for this selection? It could be useful if you could explain the factors that could affect our decision-making in the process of hybridization of dueling and mobile devices. Okay?
Yes.
The other question I have, you have precisely described Latour's actors network theory and tried to employ it as a theoretical framework in your design. Considering the technical, economical aspect of mobility devices and transformable and transportable systems, don't you think that the use of and the development of the design process through this lens can limit the design innovation and creativity and increase the operational cost of the building? Okay, so that's one of the major questions I would like you to answer. And let me just ask you my final question. I'm not going to read all of them. The last one is about the laneway suites, okay? So as you're aware, laneway suites are usually designed to be used as a rental unit in Toronto, okay?
Yes.
Therefore, the owner usually would like to spend as less money as possible for the design and construction of these small units, okay? So how do you think that the employment of ants as it stands and the use of mobility devices for creating a transformable unit is a good idea for design of these small scale units. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, okay, so
Thank you.
Yeah, so there was a bit there to digest, but I'll go back to I guess the laneway suite as part of like you're saying, it is correct. The laneway suite is being pushed more to combat the rental density of Toronto. And the way I saw it and the way I was trying to propose it as a collective was the fact that there would be a subscription-based umbrella or a model around it. So more so that the automobile itself would be a point that's subscribed to, like it's not owned, so it's reduced costs, I guess, of more so the user in that case, in which they do not need to own an automobile. The structure, and that being said, yeah, I saw this. So I saw the laneway kind of adopting some of those aspects as well. That the laneway in its own communal sense would start to add to this broader network. So kind of like it's being shared between. So the components may be shared or brought along with. So I saw it less so as an individual by each owner of that plot of land, and sawing it more as like a collective branch, maybe that prime house or prime owner would kind of be part of, and yeah, less so as an individual. So yeah, okay, I understand when you're going something a little bit more speculative, and especially in technology, that there's definitely an inherent cost to that. But yeah, I try not to use that as something that reduced, I guess, the direction I was trying to go with. And then yeah, I kind of just saw it more as becoming part of a larger frame of reference. In terms of that first question forward, I kind of missed part of it. If you may go back to that one, please, because I missed the later end of the question.
You mean the research-based design project I said, or what was the question?
I was, I think you were at the end, you were talking about operational costs as well, or
yeah,
I kind of missed it. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the question I had here,
it was,
you know, when
you're limited design innovation, I think was your.
Yeah, innovation. Yeah. Do you want me to read that question again for you? Just let me find out. I just missed my question and development of the. Okay. Yeah. You know, my question is, you actually described Labor's actor network theory and try to employ it as a theoretical framework in your design.
All right.
Considering the technical, economical aspects of mobility devices and the transformable and transportable systems that you're going to use for actually converting the laneway suite from one space to the other.
Yeah.
Don't you think that the use of ants and the development of the design process through this lens can limit the design innovation and creativity and increase the cost of operation of the building?
Okay, yeah. So I guess the limitation would be in the sense that, again, going back to that shared collective, in a sense, I tried to create, employing actor network theory, I kind of created, well, from mobility, starting with the automobile, autonomous automobile, I extracted mobility in the sense that the common platform or the skateboard architecture that I guess in which I built the common platform off of, it was able to harness all those components I needed into a singular artifact. That being said, then I kind of basically developed the dwelling kind of actually as a framework that would allow that. So there's definitely a play of going back and forth between the artifact being presented and what it's capable of, and allowing a framework in which it can express these capabilities and kind of push a limit. So I guess in some ways it creates some barriers and interruptions, like throughout, I guess in the first variation, it was basically developed around the mobility devices being the primary activator of space, which made me plan the dwelling in a very linear mentality, like this will be folded away, this will be here, and kind of like, and it will be activated in this sort. So yeah, that's linear in that train of thought. So I guess that is creates kind of a reduced, but I guess the typology I selected itself is very restricted as it is, and it's very small as it is. So then I tried to create. So I guess a lot of the design part went into like the ideas of how these things can be how these things can transform place, and then in this, so more so in the second version, I used it so that rather than a space being used one at a time, I tried to make it that this system is unfolding and folding and creating spaces out of in different compartments, rather than this space is used specifically for that kind of module bank. So then I tried to make the module banks that had all these components inside more homogeneous, in which they could be swapped out. So from previous presentation stuff too, we were talking more about like where does subscription end, and then so. In some ways, I guess economically, again, like I said, I wasn't a huge deterrent to my design process, but the way I kind of saw it is that this may just be built as a shell, and that everything that is brought on by the subscription-based service is what you fill into the dwelling. So rather than the load being put on to the person that owns the lot, rather they are building a shell for this operation to occur, rather than constructing and providing all the elements inside. So again, there was a back and forth about the element defining the collective and how the collective was going to be working. So there's kind of like a back and forth. And I think actor network theory was kind of that framework of that, rather than just saying this artifact is known for just this, kind of giving it an ability to start influencing the component or the associations of parts in total. Again, that I guess was maybe a little long, but I
just quickly jump in and challenge the whole premise of that question. Did you use actor network theory to drive your design, or are you using it to understand how this hybridization has affected the devices involved?
No, I used it as, I didn't use it to define my design. I used it as, again, a tool to start to develop and start asking different questions on how this was going to be produced.
Okay, so in that context, do you think that using it to understand things, is it possible that that can limit creativity?
I guess like in the beginning, I guess I picked a couple of routes or made a couple of decisions in which my design was to be developed. I don't think it will, I guess there's other branches I could have taken from before. I don't think it will restrain creativity. Yeah.
Ari, I'd like to invite you to offer your thoughts at this time.
Oh, thanks. I really would like to say, DJ, that in my opinion, because you make such great efforts, also with these great references to Buckminster Fuller, Super Studio, all the things that I love personally in terms of innovation, etc. When you arrive at the neighbor level, so you prototype in order to create the different scenarios and be in a real set. Probably one thing that can be also helpful for next, improvement can be, by the way, have a real test with users in terms of qualitative interviews. Like, for example, you can also clarify the design principle for them, create a bunch of experimental questionnaires or, other way to interact with real people that are your user that you want to customize the experience for. Okay. And probably in terms of the service design, also use some tools like user journeys, persona, something that can relate to the real context in which you want to operate. And the decision making can be taken according to this insight too. Because the only, let's say, preoccupation that we can have in that sense is that because you design but you don't interact with the real user, who knows if they really want to choose this scenario or the other.
Yeah.
So this will be for me very relevant because we'll add for sure through the lens of the action theory that you use as speculative intervention, an added value of your integration as designer to impact more in the neighbor. Because I think that in Toronto place, the space that you choose is amazing. I mean, there are certain conditions because this kind of action can be relevant for them, but are the community participatory interested in giving you some feedback?
Sorry. Was there a question in that
if you want to involve users, real person, you want to test with them in a future scenario that is, let's say, in a recent adaptation, if you consider this.
I could definitely take that approach into another variation. So for sure, that's kind of why I was trying to select a couple and see if it was more specified for sure. And to a degree, there's definitely for this system to work, there's definitely a degree of acceptance to occur for this system to be implemented. I am saying that, I am basically presenting it as a system in a way that someone would have to want to subscribe to in order to make it possible.
If I can jump in, it's something that comes to mind from the series of points that have been raised. Is it seems that I don't think this actually conflicts at all with what you've been saying, but maybe is a slightly different framing of it. But the decision to develop this a residential possibility in the rear of an existing property has this speculation from whoever lives in the front house, and that partly the limits on what you called the armature, which I think is the decision that's made by that owner of property, is limited partly by the land that's available and dimension of it, etc. But it's also limited by, would that person want to have a family living there or a single person per your two scenarios, or limited by their financial capacity to put that armature in place. I also recognize that between scenario 1 and scenario 2, you actually used scenario 2 as a kind of further development of your thinking, so that I think what you presented today of those two scenarios aren't, at some point, they're not really equal to each other. They're both scenario 2 kind of build off of scenario 1, and scenario 2 purposely was trying to explore different things than scenario 1 was able to reveal. And so you've got a few agendas happening simultaneously through design, which is what we always do. But it makes it a little less clear, and this is not a complaint, but it's a little less clear on that point of the bachelor apartment versus at least 2 bedrooms and the possibility of a family or a grand piano kinds of things, right? But am I right that what you're, at least by the time you got to scenario 2, you were trying to open up much more the away from the restrictions that you had in scenario 1 of having to put in a lot of, I forget exactly the terminology, but kind of fixed infrastructure, the fold away stuff, and have it much more that whoever moved in would bring that stuff or subscribe to that stuff, and it might change over time. Is that correct?
Yes.
And as a result, I can imagine that scenario 2 has that kind of looseness for, well, let's say scenario 1 would have let's say over an extended period of time would have a series of tenants who by and large would have a similar kind of social profile, that they would be that size of space and the amenities that came with it would be sufficient for their living needs, versus number 2, which could be recompiled in a much broader range of possible scenarios over the next 10, 20, 30 years and multiple tenants potentially over that time. So I don't think you've really talked about that stuff so in depth, or maybe even some of it explicitly, and it's not a complaint that you should have, but what I'm doing is I'm kind of, from where I've heard these comments, it brings to mind kind of another angle on, or what your work is containing, and what I think is you have been using to drive your scenarios, and what now, having done this work, it's revealing to us as potential.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that forward, Mark. Yeah, for sure.
Like, it's an interesting dance, right, between real life practicality of and your actual from my conversations with you, intention to take some content of reality to anchor this speculative work, and the very need to get beyond, oh, I can't do this because I don't know how hydraulics work or something. Right, and so we're in this very interesting space where we're deploying reality, but we're not, let's say, serving it in the way that, let's say, that house in Runnymede was your client and you've been hired to give them an answer, right? You're deploying these designs as vehicles for your research exploration.
Yep.
So I think, I mean, it can never be perfect in those kinds of balances, but maybe, having said this stuff, going back into your text, there may be some moments where you could put a paragraph or something to kind of articulate those scenarios, and that I know you said stuff about speculation in the near future technology, but it also, it may be worth, if you haven't done it, and I'm not recalling it at the moment, talk about real kinds of constraints versus speculation that comes out of this, what you've discovered through your design work.
Yeah, it's definitely been, it's definitely influenced thing, but yeah, no, I think you're right. I haven't explicitly said some of those characteristics. Yeah.
But what's brought out in this conversation, I find really, and it's not, I didn't hear any of it conflicting with agendas and work that you've been doing. So it's an interesting elaboration on your work that's come out of this conversation.
Yeah, I just want to. It's almost time to wrap up, but I just want to add a comment, which is, I'd say that with each subsequent milestone, the work is getting stronger, and it's just getting clearer and more focused. And the amount of ground you've covered from the beginning of the thesis to where you got to today is really remarkable. I think you've worked super hard. And it's just, it was a very good, clear presentation, really excellent discussion that came out of it because of the issues that were raised. And it's the kind of project that feels like it could continue, right?
Yeah,
Not that it's not done. Yeah. It's done for the purposes of the thesis, but it's potentially got legs, so congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
With that, I will invite any final comments before we ask DJ to lead the meeting so the committee can confer.
I just agree with Marco. Congratulations, DJ. This is an incredible project. I really appreciate your clarity and the framework that you present to us. I'm just want to invite you to do it for real. I mean, just put your legs on and go for it, because there is great potential. And I will be very glad to see and follow what's going on here. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, Maziar, your voice.
I'm on mute. Okay. Oh, congratulations, DJ. It was actually really great thesis, and I think that if you continue with that, you can get a PhD, because it has a very kind of in-depth, theoretical framework for a kind of PhD thesis. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. I echo. There's lots and lots of meat to this work, and it's interesting how on one hand you've wrestled lots of ideas from last fall into a constrained area, but it in itself is now, as what we're seeing has all this. You've just opened new doors that are very, very interesting and a value to our society in some significant ways, I think.
Yeah.
So good work.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that's a great place to leave this. DJ, if you could leave the meeting now.
Yep.
And we're going to deliberate, and then Jen, when she can, we'll get back to you to debrief our discussion. Yeah. So again, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you all again for taking the time and joining me today. Thank you very much.